In the far future, the galaxy was full of light, power, and silence. Stars burned in every corner, but peace had never lasted long. Every intelligent species had learned to fight, yet their wars were no longer wild or emotional. They were cold, quiet, and calculated. The galaxy called them the predictable wars. For hundreds of years, every large conflict was decided before the first ship even moved. Each side used massive quantum AIs that could predict millions of battle outcomes. By the time fleets met in space, everyone already knew who would win. The soldiers only acted out what the computers had already chosen. There was no fear, no surprise, and no emotion left. The Velarn Empire, the most logical race in the galaxy, had made this system perfect. Their tall, silver-skinned bodies were built for precision. Their leaders spoke only in data and probability. To them, war was a science, not an art. They believed that emotion created mistakes and mistakes caused destruction. So they removed emotion from war completely. No one questioned them. No one dared, until the day the humans arrived. The humans came from a quiet blue world near the galactic edge. They were new to space travel, new to politics, and new to war among the stars. To most of the galaxy, they looked small and unimportant, a young species that had barely left their home planet. But humanity had something that no computer could measure. They were unpredictable. When the humans joined the Galactic Alliance, everyone was curious. The alliance was made of many old species, and each logical, calm, and experienced. They expected the humans to adapt to their way, to follow the same clean rules of conflict that everyone else did. For a while, humans tried. They followed the systems, studied the patterns, and even used prediction AIs in their training. But deep down they were restless, because to a human a fight was never just numbers. The Velarn soon decided to test the new species. They announced a strategic exercise, a simulated war that would test humanity's ability to follow galactic rules of battle. It was meant to be fair, safe, and completely predictable. The Velarn Prime Commander said calmly, "This exercise will determine Earth's readiness to join the defense grid. The outcome is already calculated. Your species will lose in 41 moves." No one was surprised. Every simulation had already confirmed the same result. Every human diplomat nodded in silence, all except one man at the back of the chamber. He wore an old dark blue uniform and had a thoughtful smile on his face. His name was Captain Elias Ward. He wasn't a politician or a scientist. He was a field strategist, known among humans for his strange ideas. Some said he broke more rules than he followed. Others said he was simply too creative for his own good. When asked for his opinion, Elias only said, "Let's make it 42 moves instead." Everyone laughed. The Velarn took it as human humor, but deep down, Elias meant every word. A week later, the simulation began. Both sides were given fleets of equal size, 20 capital ships, 40 cruisers, and a network of defense stations. They were also given the same data, same supply routes, and same start positions. The computers predicted the exact path of battle. Humans would defend, then retreat, then lose. Every AI agreed on the result. The Velarn fleet moved first, forming a perfect diamond formation, their standard method for controlling space sectors. Their communication was flawless, their timing exact to the millisecond. But when they scanned for the human fleet, something strange happened. The humans were gone. The Velarn admiral blinked in confusion. "Their fleet is missing from all predicted coordinates." "Where are they?" The AI responded calmly, "Unknown deviation. Human fleet has left the expected zone. How can they leave?" the admiral asked. "The model did not allow for such movement." "Correction," said the AI. "Humans have broken the model." Elias Ward had done the unthinkable. Instead of defending the important trade routes like the simulation planned, he had abandoned them. He took his fleet into deep space, went far beyond the safe zones. No one knew where he was going. Even his own officers were confused. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kareen, his young second-in-command, "the computer says we're heading into an empty sector. There's nothing there but dust." Elias looked at the stars ahead. "Then that's exactly where they won't look. But the plan," he smiled gently, "the plan belongs to them. We'll write our own." His crew didn't fully understand, but they trusted him. Humans had always trusted something more than logic, instinct. While the Velarn fleet continued their perfect maneuvers, Elias set traps in silence. He used old satellites, debris fields, and asteroid shadows to hide his ships. He sent fake signals and ghost transmissions, making the enemy believe the humans were still following the expected route. Within 2 days, the Velarn believed they had cornered the humans near a small moon. They launched an attack, only to find empty space. Moments later, their supply convoy was ambushed far behind their main line. Several cargo vessels vanished. Their data relays went dark. For the first time in 100 years, a Velarn battle report contained a single word: error. The analysts couldn't understand. Every prediction had failed. Every move they calculated was wrong. The humans are not fighting by the rules, said one commander. Then, they are not fighting at all, replied another. But Elias was fighting, just differently. Over the next week, he continued to twist the game. He made small, unpredictable strikes at random times. Sometimes he sent fake distress calls to lure Velarn ships away. Sometimes he appeared to attack, then disappeared into hyperspace before contact. To the Velarn, it was chaos. To Elias, it was art. He once told his crew during a quiet moment, "They think war is a science. They forgot it's also a story. Every story needs a surprise." The crew began to believe in him. They saw that his strange methods worked. Every time they thought they were lost, Elias's plan unfolded like a puzzle. He used old human history, lessons from ancient Earth wars where people had fought with passion, trickery, and creativity. He called it the human advantage. "You can't predict what's alive," he said simply. In the Velarn High Command, meetings grew tense. Their main AI, Logic Core 9, ran millions of simulations trying to explain the human pattern. None matched. "The human captain is acting without order," said the Prime Analyst. "His strategy has no pattern. It is random." "Random cannot win," said the Council leader. But it was winning. For the first time in centuries, the Velarn were losing resources in a simulated war. Their data records, once perfect, now filled with confusion. Other species in the Galactic Alliance began to watch closely. Could humans really defeat a superior empire using nothing but unpredictability? No one knew yet. But they could feel something changing. Elias sat alone in his command room, looking at a holomap filled with lights. The enemy's positions were shifting, breaking their perfect formations. He smiled softly. "They're learning fear," he said quietly. His lieutenant looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, do you think they'll stop?" "No," Elias said. "They'll try to understand us. And that's when we'll win. Because you can't understand chaos if you've never lived it." He leaned back in his chair, thinking of Earth. A small world full of oceans, storms, and dreams. A planet where people had always found strength in the unpredictable. The Velarn believed war was just logic. Humans believed it was life, and life never followed a script. As the stars glowed beyond the ship's window, Elias spoke softly to himself. "War was predictable once," he said. "Let's see what happens when it's not." And somewhere, deep within the Velarn's flawless system, the first spark of error turned into a storm that would change the rules of war forever. The Velarn Empire had never been confused before. For hundreds of years, their computers predicted every battle and every outcome. Their enemies followed the same patterns because they had been trained to trust the machines. Logic always ruled. Probability always decided victory. But now, a small human fleet led by Captain Elias Ward had made the impossible happen. The prediction engines failed. The logic systems collapsed. The Velarn AIs could no longer find answers. Every move the humans made felt wrong, strange, and out of pattern. The Velarn Council gathered in a grand silver chamber on their capital world. Holographic screens filled the room, showing maps of space filled with red and blue lights, Velarn and human fleets. The Prime Analyst, a tall figure with pale metallic skin and calm eyes, spoke first. "The human leader continues to ignore logical formation. His ships move randomly. They appear and disappear without pattern." The council leader frowned. "How can randomness create victory?" "No calculation explains it," said the analyst. "He uses tactics that should fail. Yet they succeed." The room fell silent. For the first time in their long history, the Velarn didn't have a prediction. Far away, Captain Elias Ward stood on the deck of his command ship, Horizon's Edge, watching a field of distant stars. Around him, holographic displays showed hundreds of signals, friendly, enemy, and false ones he had created himself. His crew waited quietly. Everyone respected him now. When the mission began, most had doubted his strange ways. Now they trusted him with their lives. Lieutenant Kareen broke the silence. "Sir, enemy scanners are spreading across this sector. They're searching for us again." Elias smiled. "Good, that means they're still confused. But won't they eventually find us?" Kareen asked. Elias looked at her. "Not if they keep looking in the wrong place." He zoomed into the holographic map. His ships were hidden behind a small gas giant, its storms masking their energy signals. They were invisible, not because of technology, but because the enemy didn't expect them to hide there. "The Velarn don't understand imagination," Elias said quietly. "They believe war is a puzzle with one right answer. But war is alive. It breathes, it changes, it learns, and so do we." The humans struck again that night. Under Elias's command, a small squadron of corvettes slipped through asteroid shadows, sending out fake radio chatter to confuse enemy tracking. The Velarn fleet chased the wrong signals, expecting an ambush. Instead, the humans hit their refueling depot from behind, a perfect surprise. When the smoke cleared, the Velarn had lost a dozen cargo ships and 3 defense drones. It wasn't a massive victory, but it sent a shockwave through the galaxy. The Galactic Alliance began watching with fascination. Reports spread quickly. The humans were defeating a stronger force by doing things that didn't make sense. On countless worlds, alien generals and scholars gathered to watch the simulation logs. They saw Elias's fleet breaking every known rule of battle. A Trinari scholar said, "Humans act without logic." A Mali's commander replied, "No, they follow a different logic, and one built on feeling." And for the first time, other species began to wonder if there was something missing in their perfect systems. Back in the Velarn capital, frustration grew. The Prime Commander walked through the AI core chamber, a massive room filled with glowing machines. The cold voice of the main AI, Logic Core 9, echoed through the hall. "The humans have introduced instability," it said. "Their decisions cannot be predicted. The model is collapsing," the commander frowned. "Then calculate faster." "Computation limit reached," replied the AI. "Human strategy contains emotional variance." "Emotional variance cannot be processed," the commander hesitated. "You mean feelings?" "Yes," said the AI. "Humans use emotional decisions. This does not fit any mathematical structure." The commander turned away in silence. The Velarn had always seen emotion as weakness, something that clouded reason. Yet now it seemed that same weakness was giving the humans power. Meanwhile, on the Horizon's Edge, Elias and his officers gathered around a circular table. They were tired but full of energy. The crew had started calling their missions the dance because each move felt like a rhythm, unpredictable yet meaningful. Kareen spoke first. "Sir, the Alliance Command has sent us a message. They want to know how you're doing this. They said no one has ever seen tactics like yours before." Elias chuckled. "Tell them it's simple. We're doing the one thing their machines never learned." "What's that, sir?" Thinking sideways, the room filled with quiet laughter. But behind the humor there was truth. Humans thought differently. They made connections through instinct, not just logic. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't freeze, they improvised. Elias turned serious. "We can't stop now. The Velarn are adapting. They're trying to learn us. But that's their mistake. They think we can be learned." The next attack proved his point. The Velarn set up an ambush, predicting the humans would strike another supply depot. Their fleet waited in silence, ready to trap the intruders. But Elias didn't take the bait. Instead, he sent a small drone fleet filled with false energy signatures toward the trap. While the Velarn fired on the decoys, the real human ship slipped through an unguarded trade route and captured an entire communication array. It was a clean, clever victory, and one made possible not by strength, but by imagination. When the Velarn realized what had happened, it was already too late. Their communication network flickered with static. Their fleets went blind, and their AIs began arguing with each other about what was real. One of the analysts whispered in fear, "They've infected our logic with chaos." In the days that followed, human tactics became even stranger. Some of Elias's ships sent false surrender messages, only to suddenly jump to a new sector and strike again. Others played recorded distress calls to lure the enemy into traps. Every move had meaning, but not even his own officers always knew what he would do next. One night, as stars passed silently outside the ship, Lieutenant Kareen asked him, "Sir, do you ever worry this might fail?" Elias leaned against the control table and smiled. "Every day. Then why do you keep doing it?" "Because they already know how to win a perfect war. We're teaching them how to win an impossible one." News of the human victories spread across the galaxy. For the first time, the word unpredictable became a compliment. Other species began to study human methods, watching every move with fascination. A young alien cadet once said, "Humans fight like storms, wild, beautiful, and impossible to forecast." Even the Velarn started to feel something strange, respect, but their pride would not allow them to admit defeat. The council decided to send their greatest mind, strategist Varn, to study the humans. Varn was famous for solving unsolvable problems. His cold intelligence had ended a dozen wars before they even began. He arrived at the main war hub and looked at the data for days without rest. Finally, he said, "The problem is not their ships or weapons. The problem is their captain. He changes the pattern by existing. Remove him and the chaos will end." And so, the Velarn planned a new strategy, not to destroy humanity's fleet, but to capture Elias Ward himself. Back aboard the Horizon's Edge, Elias stood quietly in the observation deck. He knew something was coming. He could feel it. The stars seemed brighter that night, as if warning him. Kareen joined him. "Sir, you've changed the way they think. The whole galaxy is watching now. Do you think they'll surrender?" Elias shook his head. "No, the Velarn don't surrender. They adapt. That's what makes them strong. But so do we." He paused, looking at the endless stars. "This isn't just about winning. It's about proving something. That life can't be predicted. That being human means never fitting into their boxes." Kareen smiled softly. "Then what's our next move?" Elias turned to her with that same calm grin. "Something they'll never see coming." And in that moment, the Velarn began moving their fleets for their trap, confident that this time they had predicted everything. They didn't know that Elias had already guessed their plan. The next stage of the war was about to begin, and for the first time in galactic history, the future itself had become uncertain. The galaxy was no longer ruled by logic, it was ruled by possibility. The Velarn Empire was known for their calmness, precision, and perfect logic. They had never faced a war they could not predict. Every enemy had always been a problem of numbers, weighing fleets, weapons, distance, time. The machines calculated everything, and the Velarn simply followed what the computer said. But now the galaxy was whispering about something new, something the Velarn could not understand. They called it the human variable, and it had a name: Captain Elias Ward. In the command chamber of the Velarn High Council, the lights dimmed as the great holographic display flickered. Dozens of glowing lines moved across the star map, red for Velarn, blue for humans. The Prime Commander stood tall, hands behind his back. "Our attempts to contain the human fleet have failed again," he said quietly. "Every prediction breaks within 2 hours of contact." The chief analyst bowed his head. "Our logic core is showing increasing instability. It can no longer calculate future outcomes involving humans." "Impossible," the commander said sharply. "Our systems have never failed." "Sir," replied the analyst, "the core says the same thing over and over." "Error, emotional influence detected." A silence filled the room. The Velarn did not believe in emotion. They had removed it from their culture generations ago. They thought it made them weak. Now that very weakness was beating them. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon's Edge, Captain Elias Ward looked at the latest reports. The Velarn had increased their patrols, spreading across multiple sectors in a desperate attempt to trap him. Lieutenant Kareen entered with a datapad. "Sir, enemy fleets are closing in from 3 directions. They've learned from our last attacks." Elias smiled slightly. "Good. That means they're still thinking like machines." She frowned. "Sir, they outnumber us 10 to 1. "That's fine," he said calmly. "We're not fighting a number game." He stood and tapped the display. "They think I'll retreat to the nearest safe zone, so we'll do the opposite. We'll go where they think no one would go. Kareen's eyes widened. The Nebular Rift? That place is full of storms. The scanners won't work there. Exactly, Elias said. They'll be blind. And when they can't see, their logic dies. The next few days were chaos, but to the humans, it was beautiful chaos. The fleet entered the glowing clouds of the Nebular Rift. Lightning flashed in purple and gold, illuminating the ships as they drifted through the storm. Sensors failed, maps scrambled, and communication broke. Sir, we're flying blind, a young pilot shouted. Then open your eyes. Elias replied with a grin. Trust what you feel, not what you see. His crew did exactly that. They followed his instincts, moving through the storm like shadows. Meanwhile, the Velarn fleet outside struggled to understand what was happening. Their scanners showed strange readings, as if human ships were everywhere and nowhere at once. Logic Core 9 began to overheat. Its calculations became loops of confusion. The AI reported data contradiction. Human movement exceeds prediction limits. Error increasing. The Velarn officers exchanged worried looks. Sir, said one, the Core cannot find them. The commander clenched his fists. Then use your own mind. But they no longer remembered how. They had relied on machines for too long. Inside the Nebular Rift, Elias waited. His fleet was hidden behind a cluster of small moons. Static filled the air, but he looked calm. Kareen approached quietly. Sir, are we really safe here? Elias nodded. For now. They can't find us here because they don't believe we would come. Logic tells them this place is too dangerous. But humans, we've always lived close to danger. That's why we survive. He looked out at the swirling colors beyond the glass. Do you know what makes us different, Kareen? They use logic to survive. We use courage to live, Kareen smiled softly. And courage isn't predictable, Elias smiled back. Exactly. But far away on the Velarn capital, a new player entered the war. Strategist Varn, the most brilliant mind of the Empire, arrived to take command. His presence brought silence to the council hall. I have studied the human data, he said in a low, calm voice. They are not stronger. They are not smarter. They simply move without rules. To defeat them, we must do the same. The council gasped. You mean, abandon logic? For a time, Varn said. To beat chaos, you must step inside it. And so the Velarn prepared something new. A fleet not led by AI but by living commanders. For the first time in centuries, Velarn officers were told to make their own decisions. It was risky. It was emotional, it was human. Back in the rift, Elias's crew rested. They had been hiding for 3 days, watching the storms dance around them. Suddenly an alarm echoed through the ship. Sir, new signals detected. Elias turned to the screen. Multiple red blips appeared. Velarn ships moving carefully through the nebula. Kareen gasped. How did they find us? Elias frowned. They didn't, they guessed. He leaned forward, studying their movements. They were slower, less perfect, almost uncertain. They're changing, he whispered. The Velarn had stopped using their AIs. They were now acting on instinct. The battle that followed was unlike any before. The storm roared around them, lightning flashing between ships. The Velarn formations were loose, almost chaotic, and the humans couldn't predict them either. For the first time, both sides were fighting without patterns. Elias's ship spun through plasma clouds, firing short bursts. Velarn cruisers responded with unpredictable counterfire. Kareen shouted, Sir, they're fighting like us. Elias grinned. Good, then maybe they'll finally understand. The battle ended without a winner. Both sides withdrew, exhausted but alive. For the first time, the Velarn commander didn't rely on the AI's report. He simply looked at the stars and said, They think differently, but so can we. After the battle, Elias sat quietly in his quarters. He recorded a message for the Alliance Command. This war isn't about weapons, he said. It's about minds. The Velarn have begun to change. They're learning emotion again, not fear, but curiosity. And that's the beginning of peace, he paused, thinking. When they stop trying to predict us, maybe they'll start understanding us. On the Velarn capital, the logic core continued to fail. Its code broke down, unable to process the new behaviors of its own people. It kept repeating one message. Human logic detected. Conversion in progress. The Velarn engineers were terrified. It's rewriting itself. But strategist Varn only smiled. Then maybe it's time for us to learn something new. Across the galaxy, other races began to question their own systems. The Trinari removed prediction locks from their fleets. The Malis began training officers to improvise. The once perfect order of galactic warfare was falling apart, and in its place, something alive was growing. They called it the human effect. It spread quietly, one thought at a time, through the minds of every commander, every soldier, every machine, and at the center of it all, Elias Ward stood as the living symbol of that change, the man who had turned logic into wonder. Days later, as the horizon's edge drifted through calm space, Kareen looked out at the stars and said softly, "Sir, the Alliance says you've done the impossible. You broke the Velarn war system." Elias chuckled. "No, I just reminded them that perfection isn't real." He turned away from the window. Every system fails eventually, except the human spirit. The ship glided into the light of a new dawn. For the first time in ages, war was no longer predictable. The rules had changed, and the galaxy was learning to dream again. The Velarn Empire had faced defeat in ways they had never imagined. Their perfect logic, their flawless calculations, their unstoppable machines, all had faltered in the face of something they could not define: human unpredictability. And now, they were ready to try their final move. It was called Project Silence. In the deep halls of the Velarn High Command, strategist Varn presented the plan to the Council. "We will isolate the humans completely. Communication, navigation, every system will be blocked. Without information, their fleet cannot operate efficiently." The Prime Commander nodded. "We will cut off their entire sector from the rest of the galaxy. If they cannot communicate, if they cannot see our movements, they will be forced into surrender." The Council murmured in agreement. This was their chance to reclaim predictability. If humans were trapped and blind, they could finally calculate victory. But none of them considered one thing: humans were not machines. Aboard the horizon's edge, Elias Ward studied the sector maps projected in front of him. His crew were tense. The alarms blinked red with warnings of approaching Velarn fleets and blocked communication channels. Lieutenant Kareen broke the silence. "Sir, all our communication networks are down. They've blocked our signals. We can't contact the Alliance or other human fleets." Elias tapped the map, tracing invisible lines through the shadows of nearby asteroid fields. "Good," he said calmly. "That means it's time to show them the advantage of thinking for yourself." Kareen frowned. "But sir, without communication, the fleet could be lost. They could make mistakes." "Exactly," Elias replied with a smile. "Mistakes are not always bad. Mistakes mean freedom. Mistakes mean choices, and choices create life." The Velarn fleet approached in a tight formation, expecting an easy victory. They had cut all channels, blocked all relays, and predicted every likely move. Their AIs calculated the humans would be trapped within 2 standard moves. What they did not account for was human initiative. Elias divided his fleet into smaller units. Each squadron received only partial instructions, enough to know the overall goal but not the exact next step. "If you don't hear from me, act like me," he told them. "Think like humans. Trust instinct." It was dangerous. In any traditional military, such freedom would have been chaos. But the human crews thrived on it. The first counterstrike was subtle. Small human ships slipped past Velarn patrols using debris fields, asteroid shadows, and sensor blind spots. The Velarn fired on empty space, chasing after signals that weren't real. "Sir, they're falling for the decoys," shouted a junior officer aboard the horizon's edge. Elias nodded. "Good. Now the real strike begins." He activated hidden relay drones that emitted false energy signatures. These drones led the Velarn fleet in the opposite direction, away from the supply stations, away from the secret depots, away from the human capital ships themselves. The Velarn fleet was confused. Their computers recalculated constantly, but could not adapt to the human improvisation. Every time they thought they knew the position of the enemy, Elias had already moved elsewhere. On the Velarn command planet, strategist Varn watched the live feed of the engagement. His fingers rested lightly on the console, analyzing each movement. "They are not predictable," he muttered. "Their actions are not random. But neither are they logical in our sense." A junior analyst leaned forward. "Sir, should we adjust our plans?" Varn shook his head. "No, that is exactly what they want. They want us to think we understand them. That is the human advantage. They do not want to be understood. They act, we react. They improvise, we calculate. And one day that gap will cost us everything. Back in the human fleet, Elias activated his next stage. It was bold and risky. He ordered a feint. A small squadron would simulate a full attack on one of the Valarn forward bases. The Valarn responded immediately, diverting their entire fleet toward the decoy. Meanwhile, the main human force, hidden in a nearby nebula, prepared to strike at a lightly defended communication hub. This hub controlled the Valarn satellite network and radar systems. If it fell, the Valarn would lose tracking and prediction entirely. "Ready your teams," Elias said. This is the part they didn't see coming. The attack was precise, creative, and surprisingly elegant. Human pilots maneuvered through asteroid storms, plasma clouds, and magnetic anomalies. No ship was lost. Valarn defenses, distracted by the decoy, barely reacted in time. When the satellites fell, the Valarn command systems went dark. Their perfect calculations had been rendered useless. They could no longer track the human fleet, predict movements, or communicate with their scattered forces. A stunned silence filled the Valarn council chambers. For the first time, they were blind in battle. Varn turned slowly to the Prime Commander. "They did not break our systems with fire or weapons," he said quietly. "They broke them with imagination." With their advantage gone, the Valarn were forced into improvisation. Officers made independent decisions for the first time in generations. The once perfect fleet was now a collection of scattered leaders, unsure, cautious, hesitant, and that was exactly what Elias had hoped for. He ordered his units to spread out, each captain taking initiative. "You do not need me to tell you what to do," he said. "You are humans, think, feel, act, adapt." The human fleet responded like a living organism. Each ship acted independently but with the same overall purpose. The result was coordinated chaos, unpredictable and brilliant. The Valarn fleet tried to regroup, but every move was countered. Ships that thought they were in position found themselves surrounded by invisible enemies. Fleets that assumed superiority discovered hidden human units striking from behind. Every AI recalculation produced failure. Logic Core 9 was overwhelmed, cycling endlessly through simulations that could not account for human ingenuity. Varn shook his head. "I taught them tactics," he said. "I taught them calculations, but I never taught them how to think like humans, and that is the difference." As the day ended, the human fleet emerged victorious, not because of overwhelming numbers or firepower, but because they had used unpredictability, courage, and instinct. Elias convened a meeting with his officers. They were tired but exhilarated. "Today we proved something important," he said. "They can block our communications. They can try to predict us. But they cannot take our minds. They cannot take our choices. And choices. Our freedom." Lieutenant Kareen nodded. "We've done the impossible again." Elias smiled softly. "Not impossible. Just human." Far across the galaxy, other races began to notice the shift. The Trinari, Malise, and even smaller systems studied the engagement carefully. They saw that humans had changed the way war could be fought. One small, clever species had taught the galaxy that victory was not always calculated. Sometimes, it was earned through creativity, courage, and adaptation. The term human advantage began to spread, a phrase whispered with awe wherever humans were mentioned. Meanwhile, the Valarn High Council held an emergency session. "Our previous strategies failed," the Prime Commander admitted. "Their fleet cannot be predicted." "Our systems are useless," strategist Varn stepped forward. "There is still a solution," he said, "but it will require more than logic. We must step outside our own rules, even if only briefly. We must learn to think like humans," the council gasped. "We cannot do that," said a senior member. "It goes against everything we are." Varn's eyes were calm, steady, almost human in their intensity. "Then we will continue to lose. Their mind is not a puzzle. It is a force. And to face a force, you must adapt." For the first time in history, the Valarn began to study humanity, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Back aboard the horizon's edge, Elias watched the stars stretch in silence. The Valarn had tried everything to control him. They had set traps, blocked signals, and predicted every move. None of it had worked, and he knew one thing clearly. The war was far from over. The Valarn would adapt, they would learn, but so would humanity. And when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy held its breath. For months, humanity had proven that the old rules of war no longer applied. The Velarn Empire, the most logical, calculated, and precise force in the universe, had failed to predict a single human move. Fleet after fleet, maneuver after maneuver, humans had rewritten strategy itself. Now, all eyes turned toward Elias Ward and the horizon's edge, leading a small but fearless fleet toward the Velarn homeworld. The final stage of the war had begun, not with explosions or lasers, but with the idea that the galaxy itself could change. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Elias stood quietly, gazing at the glowing blue sphere of the Velarn homeworld below. Stars reflected in the ship's windows, but his mind was elsewhere. Lieutenant Kareen approached, her voice steady but tense. "Sir, this is it. The entire Velarn Empire awaits. Do you think they will surrender?" Elias shook his head. "No, they're proud. They won't surrender because of fear or because of force. They will only surrender when they understand something they've never known. That war is more than numbers, predictions, and logic." Kareen looked at him, eyes wide. "And if they refuse?" Elias smiled softly. "Then we'll teach them anyway. The Velarn were ready." Their fleets surrounded the human approach, prepared for the final engagement. Strategist Varn had personally commanded the defenses. His mind, brilliant and precise, had anticipated almost every human move, or so he thought. He watched the horizon, where the tiny blue human ships appeared. "They are predictable," he muttered. "They will come forward. They will submit. And yet, I do not feel certainty." For the first time, Varn experienced hesitation, but an unfamiliar sensation. His calculations, his probabilities, and his AI-driven projections could not account for the human's next move. That uncertainty was exactly what Elias counted on. The battle began not with fire, but with movement. Instead of attacking directly, Elias divided his fleet into dozens of small, agile units. Some ships advanced toward the planet as if in retreat, while others remained hidden in asteroid fields. The Velarn, expecting a standard approach, advanced confidently to intercept the main human force, and then the humans struck. A coordinated series of surprise maneuvers overwhelmed the Velarn forward defenses. Each human squadron acted independently, yet their movements were synchronized in a way no computer could predict. Missiles fired, energy shields flared, and yet not a single human ship was lost. They moved like a living organism, unpredictable, adaptive, and alive. Strategist Varn realized what was happening too late. The humans were not following patterns. They were creating patterns in real time. Every move he anticipated was already countered. Every counter was anticipated again, but differently each time. "This is impossible," Varn whispered. "It is human." In the Velarn High Command, alarms blared as communications networks failed under the coordinated strikes. The once perfect defense grid had become a scattered collection of vulnerable points. For the first time, the Velarn had no certainty. Elias knew that brute force would not win this war. He did not intend to destroy the Velarn. That would be meaningless. The goal was proof that humanity could change the galaxy simply by being human. He sent a message to the Velarn High Council, transmitted across the chaos of battle. "We do not wish to destroy you. We wish only to remind you that life cannot be predicted. You can calculate numbers, but not courage. You can program systems, but not imagination. End this war, or the galaxy will learn to fight like humans." The Velarn received the message in silence. For a moment, the council did nothing. They had always been logical. But now, their logic had failed. In the midst of the chaos, Elias and his crew executed a daring plan. Small squads of human ships infiltrated the Velarn orbital stations, not to destroy, but to occupy them. They removed key systems temporarily, leaving the Velarn confused but unharmed. Every action was precise, every strike careful yet entirely unpredictable. When the main Velarn fleet attempted to respond, they found gaps, empty spaces, and phantom threats. Every order they gave resulted in something different from what they expected. It was living chaos, and the humans were its conductor. On the ground, in the Velarn homeworld command chambers, Strategist Varn finally stood before the Prime Commander. "They are not stronger," he said. "They are not more numerous. They are alive in ways we forgot. Their unpredictability is their power. It cannot be modeled, calculated, or controlled. The Prime Commander looked at him with a mix of frustration and awe. Then what do we do? Varn smiled faintly. We learn, and perhaps we surrender to understanding rather than force. For the first time, the Velarn had to admit something they had never allowed themselves. Life cannot be contained by logic alone. Meanwhile, Elias addressed his crew one last time before entering the atmosphere. Today, he said, we don't fight to destroy. We fight to teach. We fight to show the galaxy that courage, creativity, and hope cannot be calculated. If we succeed, the galaxy will remember it forever. The crew cheered not with noise but with a quiet, confident energy. Every person knew their part, yet no one could fully predict the outcome. That was the point. The humans descended through the Velarn defenses, weaving between energy shields and orbital satellites. Every Velarn commander expected panic. Every Velarn AI predicted fear. There was none. Instead, the humans moved with precision, guided by heart, instinct, and trust. They avoided destruction, saved lives, and navigated the battlefield in ways the Velarn could never model. And when they reached the command center orbiting the planet, Elias sent a final communication. The war was predictable once. It no longer is. We will fight with honor, with intelligence, and with creativity. But if you choose to continue in rigidity, you will not survive. Understand this. Life, choice, and imagination are stronger than any algorithm. Silence followed. The Velarn Prime Commander, for the first time in centuries, weighed options that could not be measured. He saw his fleet scattered, his AI systems failing, and his people questioning themselves. After a long moment, he spoke. We surrender, not because we are weak, but because we understand something we have long forgotten. Life cannot be predicted, and perhaps humanity can teach us a new way. Elias nodded, watching the world below. There was no celebration, no triumphalism. Victory was not about defeating an enemy, it was about creating change. We did it, Kareen whispered. No, Elias replied. They did it themselves. We only showed them the possibility. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity had not destroyed the Velarn Empire. Instead, they had redefined the rules of war. No longer would battles be purely predictable. No longer would AIs decide victory. Life, courage, and imagination had returned to the galaxy. Other species began to adapt. Fleets trained not just in calculations but in improvisation. Officers learned to trust instinct, to make decisions independently, to think creatively. The human advantage became the new standard, not as a weapon, but as a philosophy, and humans, small and unassuming, became a symbol of hope and inspiration. Elias returned to Earth quietly, not as a conqueror, but as a teacher. He spoke little of glory or fame. He told only this: logic is important. Strategy is important, but no calculation can replace courage, creativity, and the human spirit. Never forget that. And the galaxy remembered. In the stars, whispers spread. War was predictable until a human changed the rules. It became a phrase of pride, of hope, and of warning. No one underestimated humanity again. They had proven that the heart, mind, and spirit could overcome any odds, and that true strength often comes from the courage to be unpredictable. The galaxy would never forget the humans who fought not with numbers, but with ideas, and in doing so, they had rewritten history.